Hi, my name is Victoria Findlay Wolfe. I live in New York and it is January 13th, 2023. It is 1 month before 10 years since my quilt, Double Edged Love, won Best in Show at the very first QuiltCon in Austin, Texas in 2013. Oh my gosh, time has flown by. I wanted to take a minute to talk about how that quilt actually came to be. When I did my first Quilt Alliance Go Tell It story on this quilt at QuiltCon, I had absolutely no words. So the story behind the quilt is that I was given a bunch of fabric by Jay McCarroll, and he was doing quilting cotton at the time, and he had given me some fabric and said, hey, can you make something with this and put it on your blog and help promote it, etc. So I did. I took it, I cut it up, I made a quilt top, and I really wasn't super excited about what I had made. And one of the things I like to do when I'm making a quilt is to always do something different than the last time that I did something. So I took the quilt top, I looked around my studio, and I had just gotten a double wedding ring die cut. And I thought, what if I take that quilt top and just roll the whole thing through the die cutting machine? And so I did. And I was left with all of these pieces. I put it up on my design wall and oh, goosebumps everywhere. All that negative space that was happening among the rings. And at the time, there was a lot of conversations going on about, Modern Quilt Guild had started, and what did that mean? And traditional quilters were having conversations about, do we need another category of quilt making? So there was a lot of hubbub going on about that. I was also going through some personal things of dealing with where I came from and where I am now. So I'm a farm girl from Minnesota. I'm now living in New York City, thinking about the whole country mouse, city mouse, thinking about my grandmother's quilts and thinking about my improvisational quilts that I was making. So I was making a lot of personal connections and also relating to the conversation that was happening at the time. When I cut those pieces apart, what I was noticing in a lot of those pieces were that some of them looked like the streets of New York City. Some of them looked like the farm fields in Minnesota. Some of them were scrappy, thinking like my grandmother's quilts and like made fabric, like my book that came out in 2012, 15 Minutes of Play. Just because it has seams in it, it's still fabric, I can use it. And I love that it left me with this puzzle to figure out how to tell this story. So as I put these pieces on the wall, I was really noticing that, some of those conversations or relationships can sort of push and pull on each other like oil and water. So I was playing with the effect in my layout about how things come together and pull apart while you're having those conversations about when something is new. Modern versus traditional. The quilt was entered into the modern traditionalism category. And when I got the quilt back, the quilt was quilted by Lisa Sipes, who I think did a fantastic job, and she did it in a very short amount of time because this was all very last minute when I finished this quilt. And I actually was not going to submit it because it was a very personal journey for me. I had so many light bulb moments go off while I was making this quilt that I was making notes, and actually it became a series of 13 double wedding rings. That was the first set of double wedding rings that were all telling a story and relating back to my grandmother's work and my work. So when I got the quilt back from Lisa, I then added applique and hand quilting and all of these elements that are considered traditional, but putting them on a modern quilt. I like to keep all of those connections together. I always like to give credit to those who came before me, so I'm very honored, and I can't believe it's been 10 years. And thank you, Modern Quilt Guild, for letting me talk about the quilt. Thank you for the Quilt Alliance for remembering to gather people's stories. And I want everybody to keep on quilting, and we'll see you on the other side.